Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We've got some stunning news for you about the ongoing Russia investigation. News that will challenge everything you thought you knew about this story. Yesterday, we showed you the terrifying extent to which Vladimir Putin's sinister tendrils have encircled the American body politic, crushing the very life from this republic. Russian agents are so intent on undermining our democracy, they have taken to promoting our own Bill of Rights back to us, the Second Amendment specifically. Now, we'll admit we're not exactly sure how that's bad, but Adam Schiff has assured us that it is. And because Schiff is a prominent member of Congress and often appears on cable news, we believe him. Now tonight we've learned that the foreign subversion goes even deeper than that. The Russian conspiracy is so subtle, so crafty, such a bewildering Slavic hall of mirrors, that the very people warning us about Russia are in fact key players in the Russian conspiracy. The leaders of the witch hunt are witches. Sound impossible? Listen to this. Last year, the Director of National Intelligence released the definitive report on Russian propaganda efforts in this country. The main focus of that report was the Russian cable channel RT America, which is funded and controlled by the Putin government. In the words of our intelligence community, RT engages in, and we're quoting now, anti-U.S. messaging likely aimed at undermining viewers' trust in U.S. democratic procedures, end quote. Our government considers RT so dangerous that the channel has been forced to register as a foreign agent. RT employees who fail to register could face prison time. No outlet in this country has ever been forced to do that. RT is a sinister place. Everybody says so. So who would go on a channel like that, one whose sole agenda is to discredit and destroy the American experiment? Well, none other than one Adam Bennett Schiff of Burbank, California. You know him as Congressman Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, the man leading the charge against Vladimir Putin's propaganda machine. And yet, Adam Schiff was part of that machine. Seriously. Here's an actual screenshot, just so you know we're not making this up. Though his office refused to confirm it tonight, we can assure you that that is indeed Adam Schiff, the one and only. In our appearance that our producers reviewed, Adam Schiff's appearance, Schiff seemed to promote conspiracy theories about the U.S. government, suggesting that the men and women who lay down their lives to keep us safe may be twisting information for their own purposes. Here's a quote. "We only see what the intelligence community wants us to see." Adam Schiff said that on Russian television. There must have been applause in the Kremlin when he did. But Schiff isn't alone. Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut also appeared on Vladimir Putin's cable channel. In one appearance, Himes said this about our men in uniform and their civilian leaders. Quote, "The invasion of Iraq, I would argue, the great American foreign policy mistake of the century." Well, in the background, you could almost hear Vladimir Putin cackling with glee. So here you have two prominent members of Congress voluntarily appearing on a foreign propaganda outlet in order to undermine confidence in America's core institutions, as they might put it, doing the bidding of a hostile foreign power. Tokyo Rose went to prison for that. Now, we're not suggesting prison at this point. That's a decision a new special counsel and federal grand juries will have to make after an appropriately extensive and independent investigation into all of this. That could take years, not that justice has a timetable. In the meantime, Schiff and Himes must recuse themselves immediately from any role in the Russia investigation, including appearances on MSNBC's primetime lineup. We assume the special counsel will also take up the mysterious and troubling case of the non-existent nude photographs, a story just broken by the Daily Mail hours ago. Last year, Adam Schiff conducted a phone call with Russian pranksters who promised him compromising photographs of Donald Trump with a Russian model. Schiff's office claims the congressman wasn't fooled by the prank. The call's transcript suggests otherwise. Schiff continued that conversation for more than 8 minutes and appeared to be taking notes during it. After the call, Schiff's office contacted somebody they believed was a Ukrainian politician seeking to set up a meeting at a foreign embassy where they could obtain those documents. Let's see. Setting up meetings with foreign operatives seeking politically damaging information about a political opponent? We thought that was treason. Adam Schiff told us it was. Congressman Mark Pocan is a colleague of Mr. Schiff's. He's a Democrat representing the state of Wisconsin, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Pocan, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, glad to be here, Tucker.
So the intelligence community, our intelligence community, described RT as a key component of the Russian propaganda machine. And here you have one of the leaders, one of the grand inquisitors in the Russia investigation appearing on it. willfully being used by the Russian government to propagandize our people, to undermine our democracy, to hack our way of life. Why should he not recuse himself immediately from the investigation on the basis of that?
I assumed from the whole intro you were doing that as tongue-in-cheek, because clearly, as you know, politicians are on many, many networks, and I don't think he was, as you're trying to describe, saying that RT is trying to undermine American democracy and doing something. So
our intelligence community.
I got the point. I get the point. I think we all get the point.
I'm just using the standards that everyone in Washington is using, that the Washington Post and the leaders of your party are using. If you have contact with the Russian government, and particularly if you willingly participate in Russian propaganda efforts.
Tucker, you don't honestly believe that someone being on a network doing an appearance on, for all you know, it could have been on, sugar content in food, because you didn't show the clip.
No, it was on American Intelligence Gathering. I watched it today. Yeah. So he's going on Vladimir Putin's propaganda outlet to talk about American Intelligence Gathering.
Tucker,
does that bother you?
Aren't you? You're comparing that to what we know ultimately happened. There were people who set up meetings in the Trump family with Russians in order to get information, and you're trying to compare that to RT.
Well,
actually, I got the tongue-in-cheek
what I'm saying is that
I just don't know if it was
for
very
a fact
effective.
that Adam Schiff did exactly that last year. He was
Are
called
you
by
honestly arguing someone, if I go on Fox Network, therefore I'm tainted by Fox Network forever?
And by the way,
look, that wouldn't make a lot of sense,
point
Tucker.
is, this is a total McCarthyite witch hunt, as you know. And the Attorney General recused himself because he shook the hand of the Russian ambassador. The whole thing is a joke, but we might as well, if we're going to use these standards, keep to them. But I have a real
Tucker, what I will agree about a joke is I think this memo that Devin Nunes, after being forced to recuse himself from the investigation after doing like small-town community theater, remember the one night he got out of the car, went to the White House to get info, the next day, I've got info, and he gave it to the White House. I mean, the fact that he then directed this memo, which now we all know there's nothing in that, I think that is far more substantive than you making a tongue-in-cheek point about a network.
I'm not here to defend Devin Nunes. I do think it raises important questions for all American citizens about what the criteria are the government's using to spy on Americans, and they're clearly quite low, and that bothers me.
Tucker, where we might find some agreement is I, along with many Republicans and Democrats, had problems when we reauthorized FISA because we want to keep it tighter, right?
Nobody should have voted for that.
I just think some of the people now who are trying to use the memo should have also been around there. If they knew it at that time, why did they allow the reauthorization of FISA to happen? So again, it just shows again one more reason why that memo is such a joke.
I'm with you on that. I don't know if it doesn't necessarily discredit the memo, but it's a real question. I want to ask you about an actual story just broke in the Daily Mail that shows that Adam Schiff had a phone call with two comedians who he believed were Russian, and they offered him photographs of Donald Trump with a Russian model. He says he knew it was a prank. That's clearly a lie, because he dispatched a member of his committee staff, Rihanna Warkala, who makes $100,000 a year. We checked, she works there. And she emailed them and said this: I understand Mr. Schiff had a productive meeting. Would you like to make some material available to Mr. Schiff through your embassy? Then again, she said, let me know the best way to pick up these materials from your embassy in Washington. Then she emailed back the next day. Do you know when we might be able to meet your colleagues at the Ukrainian embassy here in Washington to pick up the materials? How is that not Adam Schiff's office coordinating with foreign agents to get damaging material on a political opponent? Isn't that exactly what Trump is being accused of?
Not even close, but I think you should bring Adam in and ask him that if you want to answer.
He's too cowardly to come on the show. He accused me of working for Putin and then would never come on again. But I just want to ask you, how is that different from, how is that okay?
Well, it's significantly different. So first of all, this is one of the issues I got politifacted on. You know how no one likes to be politifacted in case you're wrong. I was politifacted on that meeting that they had at Trump Tower with the Russian individual, and I got, I think, a mostly true, because I said they came in the back door and we couldn't verify that the Russians came in the back door. It could have been a side door or a window.
Well, we've talked about that forever.
But it's a completely different situation.
But it's completely different.
Are you actually equating the two?
I'm actually simply asking a very straightforward question.
Yeah, and I'm asking you too. I mean, are you equating the two? Because I don't. And that's.
It doesn't even matter how it compares to anything else. On its own terms, is it all right for the ranking member, Democratic member of the Intel Committee, to set up a meeting?
I think you need to have him on to see.
But do you think it's
so
okay?
he can explain if it was what I believe I saw in your intro was that he said it was a comedian, or maybe I saw
No, we have the emails from his staff.
Then he would be a great guest to try to book on it. But I can't talk about an interview.
Oh, you can't talk
that I wasn't there for it. Well, seriously,
you can't talk about something that someone else did. You can talk about what Donald Trump Jr. did. He's not here.
You're equating it to a meeting that is very well publicized that we know about now, right?
I mean,
wouldn't you say the other? Yeah, we learned about it today.
And it seems like
the other one we've known for quite a while.
evidence he was trying to get information from a foreign government.
Tucker,
it's
really?
right here. Let's put it on the screen again.
Is the best we have RT and a Russian comedian? Is that really the best we have?
The best we have is a member of the Intel Committee staff right there,
Tucker.
Rhiannon Warkala.
I expect better. I mean, this is really.
I'm actually dead serious.
This is kind of like local community theater. This is local community theater. Devin Nunes could do this, but I don't.
I'm serious.
I'm surprised that you are. I have a lot more respect for you.
You're not going to engage, are you?
Well, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, really.
Oh, it is. It's just a joke.
So far, what you're putting up today is, seriously, when you had the intro, as I watched it while I'm sitting next to you, I thought it was tongue-in-cheek just to kind of prove a point.
The first part was. Hold on, but the first part, I mean,
it's
obviously,
the same as what you're doing now.
The Democratic Party has lost its mind, and it is conducting a McCarthyite.
So the president who said members of Congress who didn't applaud are committing treason.
I hated that. I'm not here to defend Trump. I'm here to defend the basic civil liberties I grew up with. And I
think you and I probably have some agreement on the FISA stuff, right?
Why don't you get on the stream? We can talk about it later, because it's interesting.
I'll take a look and I'll read it.
Appreciate it. Spats over Russia are distracting from the real issue of the Nunes memo, the possibility that intelligence services are spying on you and other American citizens without real restrictions. Cheryl Atkinson, a host Sinclair's Full Measure, has herself said that she's the target of government surveillance, and she joins us tonight. Cheryl, thanks a lot for coming on. You spent years on this question with basically no support from your colleagues in the media, or relatively little. Are you surprised by the posture in the press, which is it is wrong to want to know more about who the government is spying on?
Well, I'm not, because as I've written in the last couple of years and spoken to, I think the press in general, while there's still many very good reporters doing independent reporting, it's getting harder. We have invited some of the propagandists into our newsrooms. We allow them to dictate the talking points and messages du jour, and it's getting more difficult, I think, to find sort of down-the-middle, unbiased reporting.
But shouldn't the default position of a journalist be more information rather than less? So when we learned last week of the possibility that the U.S. government spied on a U.S. citizen on the basis of pretty flaky information, was it weird to see reporters stand up and say, tell us no more? We don't want to know. And in fact, you're unpatriotic if you want to know more.
I've never seen anything like it. In fact, I commented that, I've never in my lifetime seen open government groups and journalists so uncurious and begging not to be told about alleged or supposed violations of citizens' rights. And, this bleeds into a much larger picture, I think, of surveillance abuses that have occurred over the past 10, 20 years involving citizens, politicians, and journalists.
So, I mean, just to do the opposite of putting our fears to rest, this is not as uncommon as we hope it is it?
I think not. Long before Trump announced running for president, I had intel sources, contacts who I'm still in touch with, who have said that for a long time there has been presentation of bad evidence to the FISA court to justify warrants, that there has been sort of a reverse engineering when political figures want to target people illegally. They find someone in their orbit that they can target and then capture them incidentally and then accidentally capture their data and unmask them, acting surprised that that's who it was when that's the target that they intended to capture all along.
It's totally wrong. Cheryl Atkinson, you were the first to call attention to this kind of thing, and we're grateful for that. Thank you.
Thanks.
David Garrow is a historian, has written extensively on the FBI in a number of different books. In a piece for today's Wall Street Journal, he says that some members of Congress, including some Democrats, may be reverting to the J. Edgar Hoover era in their treatment of the FBI. David Garrow joins us tonight. David, thanks for coming on. We searched
Great
the
to be
land
back with you, Tucker.
For the last 3 days, for the last honest liberal who will stay consistent to the liberal values of openness and commitment to civil liberties. Give us some perspective here. When you hear people say the FBI would never do that, you're attacking our guardians by asking that question. Is there some historical precedent for this, would you say?
I'm very worried, Tucker, at how people are giving up their principles, their civil liberty principles, because of the intensity of their partisan hatred for President Trump. As you know, I'm a liberal Democrat.
Yeah.
But what we've got here is Democrats forgetting the history of the FBI and taking up these anti-civil liberty stances, defending the FBI, simply because of how intensely opposed they are to President Trump. The FBI does not have a good pedigree on electronic surveillance practices, and everything I'm aware of as a liberal Democrat is that the Bureau has been really deceptive with the Foreign Intelligence Court in applying for this extended electronic surveillance of Carter Page, the volunteer Trump advisor.
Yes.
Liberals and progressives should oppose the FBI's behavior targeting Mr. Page.
Just on civil liberties grounds, having nothing to do with the larger investigation or their like or dislike for Trump, but an American citizen is having his civil liberties violated, liberals should care, right?
And based primarily or extensively, it appears, on the dodgy Christopher Steele dossier.
Yeah.
I think we both know, again, I'm a liberal Democrat, the Steele dossier is CRAP. It's BS.
It's just the word I
if
was
the
thinking of.
FBI relied upon that in going to federal judges to surveil an American citizen, that's offensive to me as a progressive Democrat.
Exactly. David Garrow, author of the definitive biography of the last President Barack Obama. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Tucker.
An NFL player is dead thanks to the criminal behavior of a twice-deported illegal immigrant. Will it make congressional Democrats reconsider, and some Republicans, by the way, their support for de facto open borders? One of them joins us next. We'll find out. Stay tuned. NFL player Edwin Jackson of the Indianapolis Colts appears to be the most high-profile recent victim of crime by someone here illegally. Jackson was killed when his ride-sharing vehicle was allegedly hit by Manuel Orrego Zavala, a twice-deported Guatemalan immigrant who was apparently driving drunk without a driver's license. There was no reason for this man to be in the country, save that our country's politicians are steadfastly determined to let him stay. A recent chart by Axios hints at why. Democrats are dominant in districts that have a high immigrant population. Democrats know the math. They know they've alienated middle America, which does not vote for them anymore. And so immigration is central to their future victories. They cannot win without it. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal is a Democrat representing Seattle, Washington, and she joins us tonight. Congresswoman, thanks for coming on.
Happy to be here.
So you recently said of the Trump immigration proposal that it targets, quote, people of color, and it advances his hate-filled agenda. So I guess I'm willing to believe that, but the proposal would give amnesty and then citizenship to about 2 million immigrants here legally, almost all of them people of color. How is that white supremacy?
Well, let me just start by saying what he's proposing, which is, first of all, Trump is the person who actually made 1.8 million people deportable, because until he came along and rescinded DACA, those folks were all here with legal status, working, contributing billions of dollars to our economy. But then he said, okay, I'm going to take this group of young people hostage. And you know, Tucker, across the country, about 90% of Americans believe there should be a permanent solution for these young people, for these dreamers. And he said, I'm going to hold them hostage. And the ransom is going to be an ever-moving target. But the latest target is we're going to cut legal immigration by 22 million. We're going to have to get rid of the diversity visa. We're going to need $25 billion on the border. So all of a sudden, 1.8 million immigrants that he made deportable are now being traded for essentially ending legal immigration as we know it.
We're not, okay, so let me just say, by the way, we're getting breaking news that federal immigration charges have just been filed against the driver, apparently drunk in the case that we referenced coming into this segment. Let me just be clear, though, for most of American history, we've not had 1 million legal immigrants coming into this country every year. That has not been the rule for our history at all, not even close to it. And so if the cuts you just referred to were to become law, we get back to the 1990s level of legal immigration. Does that suggest that Bill Clinton was a white supremacist too?
No, this really is about the cornerstone of our country's immigration policy has always been family-based immigration. You know, if you come to this country, you can be here with your kids. And the Republican Party used to be a party of family family values. I don't know that anybody's claiming that today. But the reality is immigration is all about making sure that we continue to have people here who can do the work we need to have done, who contribute to the diversity of our country, who contribute their skills. And across the board, we've had
Well, that sounds reasonable. Then why not choose people on those bases? Why? So the majority of our legal immigrants come because they're related to someone here. We don't look for the most talented people in this or that field. For the majority, we say, do you have a relative who lives here? You would never hire for your congressional staff on that basis. You wouldn't say, oh, I'm going to take your cousin because he's your cousin.
But that's a faulty premise because you're assuming that they don't bring anything other than being a relative of a family. I mean,
I'm just saying we don't have a choice. No. I'm not. Look, I think it's great when families are reunified. I'm very pro-family. But when you're trying to make the country as impressive as you possibly can, why wouldn't you choose the most impressive possible people, regardless of who they're related to?
Because we're bringing the most impressive people. If you look at technology companies, you know, the enormous number of people who are immigrants who have started those technology companies, small businesses, same thing.
No,
you look at any field of science, research, technology.
I'm not arguing it. Look, I like immigrants. I'm not arguing against immigrants. I'm merely saying, why not get the most impressive ones? You're saying we are required or we're racist to give citizenship to the people who snuck in here and their parents and their siblings, and possibly their grandparents and uncles too, or else we're racist. So that's a hostage situation.
But that's just not true.
I
mean, what you said is not true because we don't allow grandparents into this country. We don't allow cousins to come in and be sponsored. No, we don't. We don't have any categories along that. If you listen to your show, to people on Fox News, to Donald Trump,
okay, so you're not saying that.
Hold on, Tucker. Let me just finish my point. If you listen to just what's going on, you would think that this family immigration system is somehow out of control. It's not. It took me 17 years to become a U.S. citizen. By the time I could become a U.S. citizen, my parents were already very elderly, and it would have taken another several years for them to come to this country.
Does this standard apply to any other country? So you met with Prime Minister Modi of India. Would you say to him, you need to let every person who sneaks in from Pakistan become a voting citizen immediately, or else you're a racist?
That's just not what we're talking about. We're talking about having. No, it's not.
You're saying people who snuck in have to be given citizenship.
What I'm saying is that we need to have an immigration system that actually recognizes the needs of our economy, the needs of our communities, the needs of our families.
Is there any other country that should have these standards applied to it?
There are lots of countries. I mean, you look at any number.
Okay.
Well, you look at Canada. They have a very substantial family-based immigration system. They allow a lot of refugees and immigrants in. It is, and there are different systems all over the world. But here's the thing.
Congressman, I'm sorry, we're out of time. Just give you one more sentence.
I'll quote Lindsey Graham to you, Republican senator who said, America is an idea, and we can't cut legal immigration. Right. It is important to the future of our country.
America is an idea. No. America is actual people. It's not a theory. I live here. I'm American. I'm not an idea. I'm a person.
Well,
so I disagree with Lindsey Graham on those grounds.
The idea of who we are and what we bring with our diversity and people all over the country, all over the world.
That's a decision Americans get to make. I appreciate it, Congresswoman, for you coming on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hillary Clinton's worldwide excuses tour just made a stop at Georgetown. Her latest explanation is so awesome. Miss it at your peril.
Many of you who've read my book about what happened know that I think that misogyny and sexism was part of that campaign. It was one of the contributing factors, and some of it was old-fashioned sexism and a refusal to accept the equality of women, and certainly the equality of women's leadership.
So even though the majority of married women voted for Trump, all women lost when Hillary did. That, of course, was Hillary Clinton at Georgetown University just yesterday, blaming sexism for her 2016 defeat, which apparently is still top of mind. The remarks come just days after she was denounced for tolerating sexual harassment on her very own campaign team. Blaming people is Hillary Clinton's primary public pastime for the past year. Watch.
The use of my email account was turned into, the biggest scandal since Lord knows when. I was on the way to winning until the combination of Jim Comey's letter on October 28th and Russian WikiLeaks raised doubts in the minds of people who were inclined to vote for me but got scared off. If you look at Facebook, the vast majority of the news items posted were fake. There's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites. He certainly interfered in our election. and it was clear he interfered to hurt me and to help my opponent. There was voter suppression, people trying to prevent other Americans from being able to vote. I also think I was the victim of a very broad assumption I was going to win. I inherit nothing from the Democratic Party. Look, I take responsibility for every decision I made, but that's not why I lost.
It's possible it's easier to find public appearances by Hillary Clinton that don't involve blaming everyone and every place from Manhattan to Macedonia. We haven't found one yet. Brit Hume is Fox's senior political analyst, and he joins us tonight. Nothing makes me feel more sympathetic to Hillary Clinton, Brit, than appearances like this, because I think this is someone who has no one in her life who can pull her back and tell her how she's coming off to other people.
Tucker, she reminds me of other prominent people I've known who have made a terrible mistake, had a big failure, run into trouble. And they have a very hard time, some of them, owning up to it and admitting that they were involved in a colossal failure and they are to blame. Because when you think about her failure here, her failure to win this particular election, she was up against Donald Trump, a man whose favorable ratings were deep underwater throughout virtually the entire campaign. The Electoral College math appeared to favor her overwhelmingly. The polls all said she was leading. And it didn't seem possible she could lose, and yet she did. That is a very, very hard thing to face up to. And I think she is doing her best to find a way to look at this and a way to frame it that makes it appear that she really wasn't all to blame. And otherwise, you know, I don't know what she'd do if she didn't have this crutch she's developed of all sorts of other reasons.
But I mean, not to turn this into a Bible study or anything, but you've lived a long time, and don't you think that it's true that when you accept blame for things, when you realize that your failures are your fault, it's liberating. It's good for you. You feel better when you do that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've often, every now and then I'll get asked to make a graduation speech, and my message is always the same to young people. Own your mistakes. Admit them, first of all, to yourself, and then to anyone else that might be involved. And it is liberating, and the peculiar fact of it is that, contrary to how it might feel to you, it almost always ends up making people think better of you than less.
Yes.
So, you know, it's something that, but I think in her case, the burden of this is so great, and the burden of acknowledging that in the end, it was really up to her to get out and win the election, and she failed to do so against a candidate who looked like he couldn't possibly win. So here we are. I would also say, by the way, Tucker, with regard to those most recent remarks, that one she made yesterday, I don't think that it's the case that America isn't ready for female leadership and for a woman president. They were just not, the country turned out not to be ready for this woman to be president. Remember,
of course,
she turned out not to be, as she refuses to admit, a very effective candidate, and she comes with tremendous baggage, which she's always been hesitant to recognize as well, going back to her days in Arkansas and right through her husband's presidency and beyond.
I think that's exactly, I mean, the obvious lesson in the last election is America's pretty open-minded, certainly open-minded enough to elect the right woman, I would say. But thank you very much. It's great to see you.
You bet, Tucker.
Big tech companies know almost everything about you, but they want to know more. We'll show you Google's plans to spy on your children for real next. We've been telling you for months now about the growing power of the big tech companies, whose brand of surveillance capitalism has come to shape our politics and culture in ways that many people don't perceive. Tonight we want to give you a very specific example of that. It's both a look into the near future and a terrifying illustration of the control these companies seek over our daily lives. We recently reviewed several patents filed by Google. As we describe them, ask yourself if you're comfortable giving this much power to unelected technocrats you have never met. In the first patent, filed in September of 2016, Google envisions how it could send you personalized advertising based on what a camera observes in your home. In the illustration that Google submitted to the federal government, the Patent Office, a camera in your bedroom sees a Godfather novel on your nightstand next to your bed and uses that to steer you to watching the movie. If you think that's creepy, prepare yourself, because it gets a lot creepier. In another patent application from September 2016, Google imagines how it could take control of your parenting, your relationship with your children. Google's smart home system could detect children near a liquor cabinet, for example, or in their parents' bedroom, infer that, quote, mischief is occurring, and deliver a verbal warning. In another example, Google imagines a hypothetical child called Benjamin. Google's cameras would be watching Benjamin at all times, carefully. They could see if he's playing outside or using electronics. Presumably, they'd also try to use that information to sell him things at some point, because that's the whole point of Google. The same patent also discusses how the smart home could coach families on, quote, areas of improvement. For example, if a family doesn't spend enough time together, eating together, in Google's estimation, Google might scold them and suggest that they set a goal of eating more often together. That is Google's description, not ours, by the way. We contacted Google for comment on this, and the company, and we're assuming it was a person and not a robot, replied this way, quote, we file patent applications on a variety of ideas that our employees come up with. Some of those ideas later mature into real products or services, some don't. In other words, don't worry, we're not spying on you yet. We just have the patent for it. Of course, tech is also dangerous because it is deeply addictive. In fact, more than anything, it's deeply addictive. Now, a group of early Google and Facebook employees are teaming up to check the companies they helped create. Tristan Harris is a former Google employee, heads up this new group, the Center for Humane Technology. Jim Steyer is the founder of Common Sense Media, which advocates for children, and they join us tonight. Thank you both for coming on. So you describe these products as addictive. What do you mean by that?
Well, what most people don't realize, they see addiction and they think it's happening by accident. We're addicted to lots of things. We worried about our kids in the 1970s. They were addicted to gossiping on the telephone. What this misses is that today, behind the other side of the screen when you're using it, there's 100 engineers whose entire job, not because they're evil, but their job is to figure out how do I keep you coming back to the product. So YouTube wants to autoplay the next video. Snapchat wants to put the number of days in a row in something called a streak next to every single person in your kid's contacts. They say, if you've got 30 friends, they say, here's the number of days in a row you've sent a message to each friend. And it keeps each of them hooked, because the business model, so long as it's advertising, is how do I hold on to your attention? Because the entire stock price is one-to-one linked with how much attention I get. And that's the problem.
So we know, Jim, that screen time has consequences.
Huge consequences.
And it hurts children.
Correct. It can. For sure.
And there are a lot of disturbing metrics about how kids and young adults are doing, and some of them are linked to tech use. Correct. So why has there been no public recognition of this, no widespread?
You know, it's interesting because I run Common Sense, the biggest kids media group in the country. It's taken time. I think part of it is we got so excited about the incredible technological innovation that Silicon Valley brought us. And they're amazing. We're not anti-tech. Tristan worked at Google. You know, we're not anti-tech at all. Common Sense helps you find the good stuff. But there's clearly been no regulation whatsoever. That's not even at the side level, no real discussion. And I think what's happening, you know, you're a dad just like I am. My kids are starting to go, I'm not sure I really want this in my life all the time. I don't want this constantly pinging me or wanting me to come there. And I think, I mean, Tristan told you what addiction is, but 60% of kids in the United States believe they're addicted to their cell phone. That's a really big deal.
So, but I wonder, do the tech companies know this? So you worked in them.
Yeah.
Are they aware? They must be aware.
Yes.
You're saying they're designed this to be addictive. Do they have moral qualms about this?
Well, so actually, in 2013, I created a presentation. It was the first Google memo, before a second one got really famous, saying we have a moral responsibility as Google, because no matter what we do, we bump our elbow and 1 billion people's attention goes that way.
Yes.
Or you bump your elbow and 1 billion people's attention goes that way. So how do you ethically steer 2 billion people, actually, their thoughts when they look at a smartphone or a feed? Because from the moment we wake up in the morning to 150 times we check per day, it's like it's never been easier to see as a kid. You see, if you wake up, you check your phone, and you see photo after photo of your friends having fun without you. Is that how we want to ethically care for all these millions and millions of kids' attention?
Do you think, Jim, that there are enough people at these companies who can see clearly enough to pull back from this a little bit?
The key is at the top, because here's the deal. Tristan's a whistleblower. This is the cigarette case all over again.
I agree.
Tristan, and we were just with a group of his engineering colleagues who've come forward and say, enough is enough. We got to tell you this was unintentional. So the key is the leadership at the top. I actually tell you, this is a major challenge now to the people at the very top of the key tech companies in the United States. What values do you have? Is it just about how much money you can make and how much attention, how much the arms race of attention you can win so you can monetize it by selling ads? values, or are there other values?
I couldn't.
And by the way, this is not a partisan issue. By the way,
right? Exactly.
Everybody as a parent knows this. All across the country,
and it's kind of wrecking the society, and I think we all feel that way.
And then how do you hold them accountable?
I couldn't be rooting for you guys more. Really, Godspeed. I hope you'll come back anytime.
We will.
Please do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Tucker.
We've got another exclusive report on Google coming tomorrow. Pretty shocking, actually. We're going to show you in detail how the company is tracking you without your knowledge. We tested it today. Me Too is coming to junk food. Pepsi CEO just speculated on ways that Doritos could be more family-friendly. Is it time for some feminist chips? We'll meet a feminist chip eater next. Well, we're not even allowed to have separate bathrooms for men and women anymore, but now we may have separate snack foods. In an interview, the CEO of PepsiCo, Indra Nooyi, suggested that Doritos could be more female-friendly. The female-friendly version would have a softer crunch and less cheesy residue on the fingers. Well, the comments sparked a backlash on social media, as everything does, which forced Pepsi to clarify today that there are no plans for women-specific Doritos. Kathy Rue is breathing a sigh of relief. She's founding publisher of Catalina Magazine and, of course, our spirit guide to the dark recesses of the left. Kathy, it's great to see you tonight.
Thanks. Good to see you.
So I'm trying to parse. I sat in my office afternoon thinking, like, what's upsetting about lady-specific Doritos? And my only conclusion would be they suggest that there is some inherent difference between men and women, which I think is illegal now, right?
No, what's upsetting, they were saying that women are different than men in the way that they eat, that women would like to crunch and that they would like to lick their fingers when they eat Doritos, but they don't because women don't feel comfortable in society doing these things. So for Doritos to even think that way, to think that we do not want to crunch in public, they want to silence us, that's completely wrong. They're trying to silence women by not letting us crunch in public.
No, that's right. Keep the crunch. So what you're saying is that vulgarity and rudeness are feminist victories. So if a woman, like, took her Cheeto paste and rubbed it through her hair or belched at the table, those would be feminist victories, right?
A feminist victory would be being women allowed to do what men do with their Doritos. So if men are licking their fingers, then women should be allowed to do so as well. And the CEO is saying that women don't do those things, don't feel comfortable doing those things, but want to do those things. And to allow them to enjoy their Doritos, they were going to create lady-friendly Doritos.
So you think, but just to be totally clear, it's a good thing, it's a victory for the feminist ideal when women are as repulsive as men are.
Well, why should...
Like, when you see a man... Like, would you dip tobacco ever? Do you think you throw in a dip of Copenhagen and you think, a man does this, I'm doing it?
Well, why do you get to be gross and we can't be gross? So it is a victory when women can be equal to men in any way. So, in the 1700s, women couldn't walk on the grass because it was seen as dirty, but men could walk on the grass. So it's the same concept. You can lick your fingers, but we can't. So why do we have to be so pure and clean in society?
Hey, look, I'm not imposing my values on anyone. I'm just wondering where these rules come from. And I suspect, as I often suspect when you and I talk, that a lot of these rules are actually formulated and enforced by women. Just a guess, having lived here for 48 years. But do you think there's any truth in that?
No, absolutely not. It's men. Men are running things, aren't they? Aren't men still considered the majority, even though women are the majority in numbers in this country? Men are the majority, women are the minority, and the majority makes up the rules.
Right.
And since
but what if women were actually the majority, which they are? Would that change the calculation?
Women are the majority, and fortunately still making 77 cents to every white man's
And even
dollar.
if that statistic were totally untrue?
We know from the Department of Labor.
Before we get into more fake statistics.
That's not true.
Oh, yeah. Okay, but let me ask you this. Do female-specific products always bother you? Does it bother you that bras are for sale? Those are mostly bought by women. Does that feel like a slap in the face to women, or eyeshadow?
No, products that women need are not, no, there's nothing wrong with those products, but there's no need to make a chip that doesn't let us dirty our fingers. That's what this product is saying. But men buy eyeshadow. It's okay. It's 2018. Men are buying the same products that women are buying.
Okay. Does it bother you that women's razors are pink?
Well, women's razors can be blue as well.
Okay. And last question. When you're having dinner out, with a friend of whatever, non-determinate gender, doesn't matter. Do you ever think to yourself, I'm going to be disgusting. I'm going to eat with my hands. I'm going to drink the soup from the bowl.
Do you think
just
that?
as a way to express your liberation as a woman? Do you ever do that?
You could do that and get away with it, but unfortunately, women, we're just not there yet. And Dorito and PepsiCo doesn't think we're there yet, so we're not allowed to be.
Do you
disgusting.
ever fold your pizza by putting a finger in the middle, like a roll your own cigarette, and kind of fold it and just like eat it like that? Have you ever eaten a Big Mac in fewer than 3 bites?
Yeah, if I want to be equal and treated equally, I think I will start doing that in public.
You are a feminist, Kathy Rude. I love that about you. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Thanks.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau just did some mansplaining about sexism to a woman. Whoa, it's getting weird in Canada. Details next. Well, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau isn't just a case of nepotism gone wild, though. Of course he is. Before using his father's name to take power, Trudeau was a drama teacher and apparently still can't resist the urge to lecture people. During a recent town hall, Trudeau interrupted a woman and corrected her for using the sinister sexist word, mankind.
Maternal love is the love that's going to change the future of mankind. So we'd like you to look
we like to say people kind, not necessarily mankind, because it's more inclusive.
There we go, exactly. Yes, thank you.
We can all learn from each other.
We can all learn from each other. Of course, Trudeau can't win in this postmodern PC world that he helped create. Feminists have already denounced him for mansplaining. Of course, the revolution always eats itself. That's the good part. That's about it for us tonight. Tune in every night at 8 to the show that's the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and especially groupthink, which is in profound supply these days. DVR it if you haven't already. Good night from Washington. Sean Hannity's next. Hey, Sean.